Hello and welcome to this joint CII-AGC webinar that's called Roundtable on Perspectives and Best Practices in Owner-Contractor Collaboration during COVID-19. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. This is a topic you asked for, and we want you to know that we're listening to you. We did our first COVID-19 webinar on March 25th when projects were being shut down by local governments for the first time. So this is just another update about the state of the construction industry now that we're 4 months down the road. Some general information. This webinar is being recorded, so we'll keep everybody on mute. The material will be available on our blog page, which you see on the screen. On your control panel, you'll see a section called Questions. Please feel free to enter your questions there, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. I'm Mike Pappas, CII's Associate Director for Deployment. I've been on staff at CII for a little more than 3 years, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. With me today, we have 2 owners, 2 contractors, and 2 representatives from the insurance industry. I'll let these gentlemen introduce themselves. First up is Paul Burrows from CII member company Ontario Power Generation.
Hey, Mike. It's Paul Burrows. I'm the Director of the Renewable Generation Project Management at Ontario Power Generation. We look after major projects across Ontario. Glad to be here.
Thanks, Paul. Next, we have Tommy Gay from AGC member company Southern Air.
I'm Tommy Gay, Director of Safety at Southern Air Incorporated. We are a design, build, mechanical, and electrical contractor. Our corporate office is located in Lynchburg, Virginia, and we also have locations in West Virginia and North Carolina as well.
Thanks, Tommy. Bill Hornbeck is from CII member company Zurich.
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bill Hornbeck, Risk Engineering Regional Manager for Construction South, based out of Dallas. Work for Zurich, and I've been with Zurich for about 15 years. So appreciate the opportunity, Mike.
Thanks. Tim Kirkendall from AGC member company The Beck Group.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you. Again, my name is Tim Kirkendall. I'm the Corporate Safety Director for AC Beck. It's also known as the Beck Group. We're an international design build company. Our annual volume ranges between 1 and 1.5 billion annually. We have offices from Denver all the way through Tampa in the southeast. And I'm happy to be here to see how I can help and as much as I can learn.
Thanks, Tim. Clayton Shoup is also with Zurich.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Mike. I'm Clayton Shoup, Technical Director for Casualty in the Risk Engineering Department of Zurich North America. Been with Zurich over 30 years, and happy to be with you.
And last but not least, we have Rich Wright from CII member company, the Smithsonian Institution.
Good afternoon, Rich Wright. I'm the Director of our Office of Safety, Health, and Environmental Management for the Smithsonian here in Washington, D.C. And currently I'm also leading our reopening task force for the institution to bring back visitors to our 19 museums and a national zoo, as well as our research facilities. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thank you, all of you, for joining us today. Have an agenda slide next, just a simple outline of what we'll be looking at. We're going to talk about current perspectives on major issues. We'll talk about examples of successful owner-contractor collaboration, dealing with all of these COVID-19 impacts. And last, we'll spend a couple of minutes talking about Virginia's emergency temporary standard for infectious diseases. This is something that just came out a few days ago, and we expect that it's likely that other states will follow Virginia's lead. So we thought we'd spend a few minutes talking about that today. So first off, current perspectives on major issues. We thought the first thing that we'd talk about is employee safety in the office. Tommy, what's your company doing with respect to getting people back in the office?
So starting back in March, all office employees, with the exception of a few that were deemed critical to remain in the office, have been working remotely. We just started our phase one of reopening our offices this week. This will allow up to 25% of our workforce to return. In preparation for this, we rolled out online training for all office employees to alert them of changes that were made for their health and safety. These precautions included things like personal health screenings and illness reporting procedures, hand washing, cleaning and disinfecting procedures, ionizing air purifiers that were placed in the airstream, face cover requirements, and room capacity limits to support social distancing, just to name a few.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Clayton, can you tell us a little bit about what Zurich is doing and perhaps what you've seen some of your client companies doing?
So thanks, Mike. So what, very similar to what Tommy mentioned, Zurich, in March moved to a flex work situation and closed all of our offices with the exception for some essential personnel. And right now, our plan is to open the offices again in September at the earliest, and that date's been moved back a couple of times already, so could be moved back more. At the time that we open, we'll only allow 20% of our staff to go into the offices, so it's going to need to be coordination with management. On days that individuals want to go into the offices. We're doing quite a bit of work in the offices, doing a deep cleaning and sanitizing. We're taking some of our some of the perks, you might say, at our social areas, kind of offline, refrigerators, coffee machines and soda dispensers and that kind of stuff offline for the time being. We're also removing shared equipment like mouse or maybe mice and keyboards at each workstation, and we will be placing disinfectant wipes and hand sanitizer at each workstation for the use by our employees. And piggybacking on something Tommy said, we are reducing the available workspaces. So many of our workspaces will be marked not available in order to facilitate social and physical distancing. That same will go into conference rooms and the like, where we will be reducing significantly the potential occupancy of those conference rooms. And as our employees return, they'll be asked to wear face masks, while they're in common areas, going to their workstation, going to the bathroom, etc. But they will not be asked to wear a face mask when they're at their workstation. We're also going to be asking our employees to do a self-certification before they come into the office. So asking them to do a temperature check, answer, the standard questions that we've all been hearing about regarding potential symptoms of illness, potential contact with individuals who were diagnosed with COVID or travel to hotspot areas and the like. So, and then we'll be recording that data in a wellness app that Zurich is already using.
Okay, thanks. Quite a few things going on there. Rich, you've got a little bit different perspective of public access to buildings and other facilities. You recently opened up some of your facilities to the public. Tell us about that.
Right. So similar to what Tommy and Clayton mentioned, we've got a phased approach to reopening, both to our own staff as well as the public. And we're in our phase 1 to phase 2, depending on the geographic location, of course, gating criteria, like you've all seen regarding cases and positivity rates, cases per 100,000, things like that. That's what we're watching. And we did just initially last Friday open the National Zoo and the Udvar-Hazy Center, which is part of the Air and Space Museum. Open that up out at Dulles Airport, our first of 19 facilities to reopen to the public. So we've similarly instituted very, things like social distancing, face covering requirements, signage. We've put in place restrictions, of course, on the number of visitors that we can have, both indoors and outdoors at the National Zoo. We are requiring face coverings, and we are also requiring at least our visitors to acknowledge their health status based on when they get tickets. For the first time, we're utilizing a time ticketing approach, at least initially here at our facilities, to both, of course, manage capacities within our facilities, manage expectations, and of course, give some guidance to our visitors that they will have to wear a face covering. There will be some exhibits that may be off limits. A lot of our items that used to be interactives have been shut down, and we've done that. And of course, they do acknowledge that from a health standpoint, they're healthy to come into the to our facilities, and that's on our time tickets and of course signage throughout. So thus far, we've seen a great compliance with wearing face coverings and for the most part social distancing, and we're off to a pretty good start. And we've got a phased approach to roll out and open the remainder of our facilities when we feel safe, of course, both for our staff, our employees, and our visitors. So so far so good.
Okay, thank you. Now let's shift and talk about employee safety on the job site. And Tim, let's start with you. This is really just another application of the risk management process, isn't it?
It really is. You keep in mind that from the construction side of things, we're in the business, we're in the risk business, and so everything that we do typically involves identifying risks and mitigating those risks before people are exposed to those risks. So I think for a lot of construction companies, this, especially dealing with COVID, this was just another layer for what we had to do to keep our people safe. And so very similar to what everybody else I'm sure is doing. The big focus at the end of March and the first part of April, the big focus was verbal screening, right? And doing some temperature checks. And I'm sure everybody's company struggled to find the no-touch thermometers and what's the appropriate questions to ask. And so we started doing that. Then we started putting cleaning processes together where we're cleaning high-touch areas. How do you clean and disinfect those on a regular basis? We had to, again, it's like everybody's like Tom says, we had to teach people. You can't just tell. For us, it's not easy just to tell a construction worker, go wash your hands more frequently. That doesn't necessarily always work out on some projects. So we had to identify those projects that didn't have adequate hand washing facilities. And so, some of those were hard lessons to learn that we thought we were doing well, and we weren't. But so it was an opportunity for us to step up our game. But we also had to teach people things like we had to make it a practice of washing your hands every hour, and that's just the norm on our projects now. You wash your hands every hour, and that's the only way that we can continue a message of because that everything we do is based on that. Now we're cleaning high touch areas every hour. Now we're doing all of these things, so kind of in an hour increments, and those are the easier things for us to do. And and just focusing on doing what's right for the worker. I mean, at corporate, it's easy to do because it's a little bit more structured. It's not as dynamic. Projects, most construction projects, they're constantly moving, and no 2 days are the same. Although it seems like Groundhog Day for a lot of projects. But getting to how you engage the employee was our biggest thing. So we looked at how do we utilize this as an opportunity to engage employees differently. And you know, we think we've been pretty successful with a lot of that.
Okay, thanks. Rich, what can you add from an owner perspective?
Yeah, I think similar to you know what Tim said, this is just another aspect of risk management. And so when we shut down essentially our facilities to the public back in March 14th, and largely only had our really our essential staff coming in at that point in time too. We did keep our construction going, and we have some fairly large construction projects going across the Smithsonian. They were deemed essential and kept them going. I think it was in early April we may have had our first COVID case reported to us by one of our construction contractors, and at that point in time we knew there was the potential that we wanted to protect, of course, our contractors, but then our staff as well that was interacting with them. So essentially we instituted an addendum, developed an addendum to our site safety health plan that follows largely the requirements of the Corps of Engineers EM 38511 site safety plan requirements. And we developed this in concert with our construction division and our contracting division. And part of that addendum focused on how to mitigate the COVID risk. And we essentially indicated that as a contractor, you need to appoint a COVID safety officer to the job. You needed to essentially implement some new training requirements that we have developed on top of the contractor's safety requirements. In that site safety plan, we required prevention and control measures, of course, social distancing controls and mechanisms, you know, cleaning and hygiene, a lot of things that Tim mentioned, daily screening, a requirement for all that were coming onto our workplace, face coverings, of course, required on our job sites, and COVID case detection and reporting guidelines. If in fact one of our contractors does have a positive case, how is that reported, and how is there a process to do the appropriate contact tracing, both for the contract staff and then of course for our oversight staff that could be security, and it could be our contracting representatives and construction management staff. And I think after we've implemented that, it took a little time, but we've seen a much better process now, and much less, when we do have a case, there's much less folks being quarantined, for example, and the case count has definitely gone down through the implementation of this addendum to a site safety plan. It's worked pretty well.
Great, thank you. Let's talk a little bit about, you know, we all know about social distancing now and new PPE requirements, including masks and so forth. Let's talk about that, including some, you know, what are we doing about off-site behavior, off-work behavior, and that type of thing. Tommy, how is Southern Air implementing these requirements?
So while social distancing is strongly adhered to, many tasks that we work on require working either in pairs or in teams, which puts you in close contact. So the face covers obviously offer the best protection for those around you, but they also can introduce some other hazards that we've seen and also tried to mitigate before they become an issue. A couple that I wanted to maybe share with the group are medical issues. You have some folks that either have asthma or anxiety or even claustrophobia that can prevent them from wearing facial covers. You have heat illness. Wearing these face covers, I'm sure many of you have noticed it's difficult, especially when it's as hot as it is. Here in Virginia, not typical for us in July, but we've been 90 or above for 29 consecutive days. That's more like the weather that Tim faces in Texas. So it's been tough. So acclimating yourself to that. A few other things that go along with the heat illness and considerations, making sure that you consider using a breathable fabric like cotton versus polyester, using light colors, which are cooler, whereas black can absorb the heat. Bringing a spare mask so that you can change it out in the event yours becomes sweaty, which it's likely to become sweaty. Wash the mask after each wearing. Provide workers with water, rest, and shade, things that we've always done, but additional breaks, additional water, these things are more important than ever now with the new PPE requirements that we have for our team. And then also not forgetting training and monitoring for signs and symptoms of heat illness, catching it in the early stages so that it doesn't become an emergency. Last, I would list safety glasses fogging. That's been an industry challenge forever, but more so now than before. I would suggest trying different safety glass manufacturers out there if you're having issues. I've yet to wear a pair of safety glasses that were truly anti-fog, but some are better than others, that's for sure. A little trick of the trade, something that we've learned and have promoted, is surgical tape. If you place that across the top of mask and bridge of nose, this will prevent the hot air from coming upwards towards your eyes and help prevent the fogging of the safety glasses. Consider using something hyperallergenic in the event you have sensitive skin. So that would be my take on the social distancing and face covers, and just not forgetting that you can remove one hazard, which we need to do, and protect those around us, but you can introduce others.
Thanks, appreciate that. Those are some good hints. Paul, you mentioned that some of your contractors have been handing out COVID kits. Can you tell us a little about that?
Hey, Mike. Sure. We have a contractor. Actually, I'll back up a bit. We stopped most of our, or wound down most of our non-essential projects back in by early April. So we started in March of the wind down, and I would say immediately after that, we started to plan the restart of the projects and work on the new safety plans, enhancing safety plans, enhancing COVID requirements. Through April, May, and by the end of May, we were restarting our non-essential projects up and have gone. I think almost 100% of our projects are back working by mid-June. So that gives some context to what we did in that downtime. And we also, so some of our contractors, they've put together a COVID kit for workers, which contains pretty much all the extra things they need when they're on site, including masks, hand sanitizer, cleaning wipes. They also have an instruction for daily screening process and expectations of the site, all in a neat package that they can carry with them or put in their locker or keep with them in their truck. And that same contractor also implemented a pre-screening app where the workers can screen themselves, the daily sort of due diligence check-in prior to arriving at site. So when they arrive at site, there's no waiting in lines. They can come in based on the results of the pre-screening. So I thought that was fairly innovative. One other thing that we've done is as well, once you started to get back and people got used to doing work again, it takes a bit of effort to remain cognizant of the social distancing. So we are in Canada, but we had these helmet stickers. I don't know if people can see that, but it's do your part, stay 2 meters apart. So it's just a little reminder for their helmet that physical distancing is the first line of defense. And I think people appreciate having the sticker as well. So thanks, Mike.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. Hard hat stickers always get a lot of good attention. Bill, what have you seen some of your clients do?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So, supply chain was early on kind of the challenge, right? Trying to get a hold of PPE, hand sanitizers, cleaning supplies, all those things were in short demand, all the way down to toilet paper, even some building materials, right? So we had a lot of materials that were coming from other countries or the shipping process across the country here locally, domestically was a challenge. So in coming into that and looking at the CDC guidelines, some companies were unable to reopen, but we really saw very few projects shut down. One of the things we're trying to do is make sure we're following the guidelines and make sure we follow the guidelines both at work and at home, and talking to our customers about the same. A lot of times, the individual worker is very astute and aware on the project site, but they let their guard down when they go home. So just understanding the potential effects of catching that at home or in your out of work activities, and bringing that back to the job site. We looked at a lot of our customers were really struggling with, of course, getting the PPE, but also getting into a groove, if you will, with the 6-foot social distancing, and how that was affecting work sequencing, training, safety meetings, stretch and flex, elevator use. And we helped them develop plans for that, how to manage that with the buck hoists and the man lifts, and also one-way paths through the job sites and up and down stairwells. So you have, one stairwell up, one stairwell down. It causes a lot of transitioning on the site and just a different way of thinking. But we've been very impressed with how quickly our customers responded to that and really adjusted very quickly.
Okay, let's shift and talk about training a minute. Tim, you kind of hinted at some training issues in terms of, reminding people to wash their hands every hour and that type of thing. What other kinds of training issues have you guys dealt with?
I have a group of, I think, pretty good safety guys. So we sat down and we said, listen, how can we use the current culture, the climate and the culture we find in, right? Minimizing employees, maximizing distance, isolation of employees. So what we really pushed really hard was to look at how do we integrate technology in more areas than it's ever been used before. And so for us, like I said about the screening, what we've really gone to is there are QR codes outside of our projects in multiple locations, and that if you have a smartphone, you go up, you screen it, you answer the question. First time you do it, you have to kind of put some demographic information in. The second time you use your phone number, it auto-populates it. You scan it, you do your co-bed screening, you walk in, you get your temperature, and you move on. So, and you showed the score, right? You get a score with a 5-question test. But what we did is we said, hey, listen, we're really, that's just the beginning of what we can do. So we had a secondary QR code next to it, and we had a job meeting where we were going to do a job-wide safety meeting, and we just recorded it really on an iPhone, put it on YouTube, and we link it with SurveyMonkey, and it's the same concept. You have the guys who screen it or scan it. It shows up. It shows that 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute job-wide safety meeting or a job-wide update or whatever. And then you've got the demographics, or at least the count of the people who've done it. And then we're measuring how effective that is. Now it goes to if you want to use a buck hoist or you want to use the elevator, you go up, you have to screen it, and it's questions, right? It's 3 questions. What's the maximum allowed on this elevator? There's a sign right next to it. It says 5. There's it's this, and this, and you show the operator, and you're good to go. And so we're trying to utilize the training and the technology to help us create a culture where it's easier and more acceptable for people to get that training on their convenience. And then, for us, the other part of training was, you can say something over and over, but saying something doesn't necessarily get it. You have to demonstrate it. We actually had a job-wide safety meeting early in April at a couple of projects where we were bringing people in together in groups of less than 10 and trying to keep people apart, and then the superintendent actually demonstrating how the proper way to wash your hands, and then have everybody one at a time wash their hands. And so we're trying to create this environment where we utilize technology, but we also don't get away from that small group training. In our business, small group training is still very important. You have to be able to look a person in the eye. You have to be able to ask them some questions, because you want to make sure that this person is retaining some of the information and they're comprehending the message that you're sending. You're just having to do it on a smaller deal. Our biggest win, not to go on, but our biggest win is how we're utilizing that QR code and that link to do our onboarding for our new employee orientations or new worker orientation. So our new worker orientation on a project, you would traditionally come in, sit in a trailer. Somebody would give you a 15, 20, 30-minute orientation on everything related to the project, the hazards, the project, everything else. We've taken that to a very short PowerPoint oral review of a PowerPoint presentation that's videotaped. And then you take a questionnaire, you have a test within that, and you show that to the, before you even come to the project, you show that document to the safety guy. He gets that, we use a SurveyMonkey or a Microsoft Forms, I'm not sure which one. He gets the list every time it's populated. We track it by subcontractor. All you do now is show up and the safety guy is giving you your badge or your hard hat sticker. And then we're out of the in-person orientation business. And ideally, it's freeing up our safety guys and our superintendents and our project managers, not to focus on safety, but true safety, practicing true safety and risk mitigation is done in the field. You can do all the pre-planning you want. You can have the best written plans until sunrise comes up and guys start making decisions on a project. And so we're finding that training is taking a new shape, and how willing we are to embrace it is determining how successful we are. And we're not original thinkers in this. Listen, if there's safety guys on the line, they risk managers, you learn this. I watch one, I steal one, I incorporate this, I incorporate a little bit of what this person's doing, and before you know it, I've kind of got my collective version of what two other people are doing. And safety, that's the way it should be. Safety should not be a competitive advantage in our business. And I'm really lucky in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. It really isn't. We openly share what we're doing, and we want to make the industry better, and we want to make we want to make our trade partners as well as our clients successful.
Okay, thank you. Clayton, what have you seen in terms of training?
So thanks, Mike. I'd like to kind of piggyback on some of the things that Tim had just talked about very passionately, and talk about a vendor app that we've been working with that maybe does some of the same things that Tim has been talking about. The app is called Real-Time Risk Solutions, and it allows the forwarding of communications, broadcasting communications to folks on the job site, through the app, announcements. It allows providing training and quizzes after the training through the app. The procedures and policies can be right there at their fingertips if they have questions, and it's available. And they can also communicate changes that may need to be made because of changing conditions on the job site. It also allows the employee to maintain, the log of their temperature, symptoms, and everything, other things that they would do, before coming on the job site, as well as, keeping records of other routine things that are going on the job site, safety logs, checklists, documenting safety meetings, and the like. So it's one we've just started working with, see a lot of a possibility with, and just wanted to mention that for the folks on the webinar.
Thank you. Tommy, your company has changed how you do your orientation.
So yeah, we're using a LMS system. It's called Moodle. The best part of Moodle is it's a free platform. It's actually used by quite a few professors in the college setting as well. What we've done is uploaded all of our new hire orientation training along with the quizzes and tests. And we also use it for continued education purposes, such as COVID-19 related updates. The way this system works is once you enter an employee with an employee number, it will generate an email to them with a training request, and they sign in, and it will actually time the class, time spent, record all of the documentation. We all know documentation retention is huge. All of that is kept in a LMS system within Moodle, but it's also very easily transferred into your own database, which is what we choose to do to keep it all in one common spot. So that's been huge for us with the next to no face-to-face interaction training. Like Tim had alluded to, that's where you get your best bang for the buck, being able to be in person and relate and get to know one another. But it's different times right now. We've started to do some in-person classes in small groups, but this online training through Moodle has been a lifesaver for us to make sure that we didn't stop with things important like new hire orientation and continued education.
Okay. Of course, since this started, there have been questions about, stop work orders, and is, when the government shuts things down, is that a force majeure, and who's paying for all of this? Tim, can you tell me a little bit about how your company is tracking COVID costs and handling some of these contractual issues?
Sure. I think like most safety guys, I'm not a lawyer, but I spend enough time talking with lawyers, and we have in-house counsel. Our risk managers, he's a lawyer as well. So I've gotten somewhat of an education on some contract language. But what we did is we said, hey, from the very beginning of this, we said, hey, listen, all of our projects need to set aside a cost code for COVID-19. So anything that project is doing above and beyond what it's normally doing in the course of construction gets coded to COVID-19. And so what we do is we ask each of those projects. We have to do the corporate too. So I've got a code that we funnel everything through net gaiters, masks to the thermometers that we use up here, to the standing thermometer, to the Tyvek wristbands that you put on everybody who comes through after they've been screened. We do that on all our jobs. So once you were screened in the morning, you can come and go all day long without additional screening. What we ask our projects to do is we ask them to also sit down every month with the owner and say, hey, listen, and review that exact cost. And so now it becomes, it's small bites becomes a little bit easier for typically for owners, more palatable. And so what we want to do is we want to talk about how do we share this cost? Is this something that can be covered with contingency? Is this something that a percentage of this that the owner is willing to participate in? But you have to track those separately. You also have to show how you track them separately. Owners are faced with, Paul can go to that, but they're faced with, funding issues that we don't necessarily have. They have some other issues. What we're worried about is keeping our projects safe, keeping them moving, right? We want to keep our guys employed and engaged because we don't want, if we want to do everything we can to eliminate a financial impact on our people the best we can, but in the same way, managing the risk and exposure to them and not putting them at risk there. So we do that through that cost code. And then what we find is most owners understand that and they're willing to participate. We have some owners that'll take 100% of the cost. We have some that'll take 50% of the cost, and some will not take any of the cost. So it all depends on the matrix of the project and honestly the owner.
Thanks. These are all murky issues that will get settled eventually, but I like your approach in that, you know, tracking the cost and setting up a cost code is a great way to start. That way you've got the data and you can use it later. You know, however the attorneys and companies choose to pursue these things. Let's shift now and talk about some examples of successful owner-contractor collaboration. The first thing is successful collaboration during project shutdown and restart. Paul, do you have any examples from your perspective on this?
Yeah, hey, Mike, one of the things we did other than come up with the new safety, COVID safety requirements was we had a few contracts that were in the final stages of negotiation. Of course, when this risk came at us back in March, it did raise concerns from both parties. One, from the owner's perspective that, hey, you know, contractor, here's a risk you should be managing. This is really your risk. And from the contractor's perspective, hey, I don't know where this risk is going. It could be big, and I don't have that kind of financial capability to just carry these costs for the life of the project. So we had to sit down and really get a common understanding of those risks and the additional measures that we thought were required to manage the risks. And then we developed solutions from there. In my mind, you know, we do a lot of hydroelectric stations, and it's a bit like the geotechnical risk where you have some idea of the conditions, but you really don't know what's there till you get to the bottom of the excavation. And so there's these unknown risks. We know COVID brings with it costs. We know COVID brings with it some risks of an outbreak or further Ministry of Labor or Department of Labor guidelines coming out. But really the underlying principles that we put forth were, well, the contractor really shouldn't be profiting from these risks occurring, but they shouldn't go bankrupt in the process. So we had lots of sort of specific examples around that. And on some cases, we used allowances that could be drawn upon. And as Tim said, we have to keep track of those costs specifically. So it takes a bit more accounting on our part. And in other cases, we looked at whereas a target cost may be providing a bit of a deadband overall on the performance incentives or disincentives side of things. So that was really, it just took a good conversation and trying to be as fair as possible, looking at the success of the project as the key outcome. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, that's you bet. That's the key perspective, right? The success of the project. Tim already addressed some of the ways that the Beck Group has worked on some of these issues in collaboration with the owners. Let's talk to Bill. What have you seen with your clients, Bill?
You know, Mike, we've seen quite a few challenges, of course, through this whole process. And one of the things with you know, reopening and ramping back up for projects was a concern with work comp and GL. Those situations vary state by state. They vary by SIC code, and in some cases they get down to the local level. For instance, in Florida, I know down in the Miami area seems to be much different than the rest of the state of Florida in how they're mandating you know, certain aspects of getting back to work. One of the big keys that we saw our customers really attacking were things that we might be you know, not really at first at mind was insurance certificates and making sure when they restart, have they expired? Do we need to get new and current insurance certificates? Going back to the owners and talking with contractors, owners, GCs, vendors, suppliers, everybody kind of collaboratively working to make sure contract terms were still right. There was a default concern for some subs, cash flow, just concerns at all of being able to float the project. I think in some cases, GCs were hit pretty hard. Thankfully, not as much as what was originally expected. And owners seem to fare pretty well, all things considered. Risk register came into mind, manpower, equipment leases, work sequencing, all of these things were key components of restarting the job. A new item that popped up and has really been a hot topic for the last couple of years, but really since March, is cybercrime. And I would really caution everybody to take a look at your security layers, especially in the project, because when you're at a remote project site, you may or may not be connected to your home office and may not enjoy the protections that your home office provides. In many cases we do, but in some cases they did not, and so they were vulnerable. So I think it's good to know that and keep that in mind. Some of the ways that the contractors really attacked these issues, especially with contracts, was really focusing on document control, making sure they were meeting the new health guidelines, making sure their leases and remobilization of equipment and restarting were done properly with maintenance records, overall communication and training, and then controlling the non-essential visitors. I think that's another key item that was often overlooked in the beginning. How do we keep people who don't need to be there out? And a lot of times these are visitors, they're vendors, they're people, sales personnel, what have you. We all deal with those on job sites regularly, but that was something that I think was very effective in just basically taking those people out of the equation to possibly infect the site population. And that's really all I got.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to come right back to you and ask you about what kind of technologies and tools have you seen that aid in successful collaboration?
That's a great question, because I think one of our habits now in construction in the last decade has been to turn to technology and look for solutions where typically we might look either within our own teams or locally. For instance, here in the Dallas area, like Tim mentioned, we have a great collaboration between the contractors, but we turned to technology firms, and we were looking for different services and products that might be helpful. One that did come up was called contact tracing from a vendor named Triax. Many of our customers are familiar with Triax. They have a variety of products. One was called Spotter, which was originally developed for employees falling, and it could detect the rapid descent of the sensor that was worn on the body. And from that came contact tracing, which was able to use similar technology and be able to tell distancing and track that over a period of time. Now, keep in mind, this is a lot of information on a job site, and it does cast a broad net over your entire project, but it does show when people cluster, and it can tell how long, the durations that they were, say, in violation or within the 6 feet. It could tell how many. It was really become a kind of a unique product that's out there that is gaining a lot of traction. The other, as Tim mentioned, is better leveraging the mobile devices, your iPads, your cell phones, using those for touchless services, entry into certain areas, communication, like Tim said, being able to do training, a variety of different services. Some are even developing access, let's say to a room or a form of payment or elevator access, where you don't have to touch the buttons, or you don't have to touch, let's say, a common PIN, to sign something. You can do a lot of that right through your phone. The next one was drone usage. I think this one has been really interesting. I just saw a video Monday, actually using drones to fight fires. And drones, these were heavy duty enough to lift up a fire hose 75 feet and spray the water on the side of the building burning. So there's that. There's drone usage for inspections. Could be window installation, could be welding inspections, pretty much you name it. And then the last one I would mention is remote collaboration. And that's a tool we're able to use our cell phones and work with a customer via a secure app, where they can show us, similar to what you would do with FaceTime, and show us what they're looking at. And then, for instance, if there's a hazard that was identified on our last visit, and now we want to verify that's been corrected and talk to the customer about that, they can literally go and show us that. You can draw on it with your finger like a telestrator to point out perhaps when a ladder's been added back into a trench or what have you. So anyway, a variety of neat technologies that are coming out, and I'm sure there's countless more on the way.
Yeah, let's talk to Paul. What kind of technologies and tools have you seen to aid in successful collaboration?
Hey, Mike. We've we had travel bans for most of that period, and still internationally, it's difficult to travel, that's for sure. But one of the things that our engineering group was already experimenting with from an innovation perspective was Microsoft HoloLens technology. And so some of our project managers thought, well, hey, could we ship these HoloLens glasses down to Brazil or Czechoslovakia or Slovakia or other locations where we're doing factory acceptance testing, and have the local engineers witness the testing, and then our engineers here see it on the computer screen themselves. So we looked at that, and it was quite successful. And I would say it was not 100% perfect, but it's something we're definitely pursuing to keep improving that process, and also leveraging other imaging technologies to get a better image of what's happening, and that combined with eventually at some point normal factory acceptance testing, I think there's going to be a big improvement.
Okay, great. The great philosopher Yogi Berra said that, you know, predictions are tricky, especially about the future, but they are also kind of interesting to think about. So let's talk about how we think this COVID-19 issue will permanently change the construction industry. Paul, I'll go right back to you first.
Sure, Mike. As I just mentioned, the HoloLens technology, I see that as a big game changer to become more actively involved, not only in remote factories for factory acceptance testing or witnessing processes, also on the construction site, which tend to be remote here in Ontario, to be able to have access to various activities as required, and it really reduces the risk around travel, and allows us to be more actively involved at the site, and it saves definitely travel time and travel costs as well. The other thing that we've found over this period as well was we really have been working at separating the construction, I'll say, facilities, so trailers, lunchrooms, and things like that, from our operating plants, and trying to get them into at least an isolated position where they're not impacting operations, and the workers aren't commingling. And I think I see that as a plus going forward, bringing in better facilities for the project, having a cleaner, more tidy project as well.
Thank you. Tommy, what do you see?
So I see a better awareness of health. A lot of us were our own worst enemies. Now you're seeing people no longer reporting to work, nor is it the expectation that people who aren't feeling well come in. Now it's a risk that no one wants to take, and rightfully so. Another would be additional hand washing and sanitizing stations throughout construction sites. This has been a very much needed and well received change, because for too long there have been minimal to no abilities to wash or sanitize on some sites, and those that did have them and at least do the bare minimums of what OSHA required just wasn't enough, in my opinion, and most folks in the field would agree. So those are two permanent changes that I see, and I think are changes for the better.
Okay, thank you. And Bill, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Oddly enough, our Zurich Construction Specialties team had just done a study on this last month, early part of June, and looking at just long-term how COVID-19 and a lot of these effects will change our industry. And so I'll rattle off a few of these here, but first was adaptability. This was kind of focusing on hotel transition to temporary hospital space, especially for those hotels that are connected or adjacent to existing hospitals. And of course, that would work for new construction as well. Integration of natural sunlight and fresh air. Operable windows were highlighted in this because in so many cases, you know, office buildings, windows are not capable of opening. Ventilation, talking about less air conditioning and more cross ventilation, increase air change rates, using airlocks to isolate sections of a building. This I think will be very common in hospital use. Increased number of data centers to support virtual work and learning. So I think we're going to see a further explosion of construction of data centers. I think they're going to be more plentiful and will probably be a lot larger facilities. Development of healthy building standards, similar to LEED standards. I think that's going to be something that definitely comes out of this. Increased use of touch-free facial recognition and temperature reading capabilities built into the buildings. Increased use of finished materials that are easily cleaned and antimicrobial. Housekeeping and sanitation practices overall will include much greater focus on sanitizing and disinfecting. And I think what we're going to see too is more smaller facilities inside the building, so more closets and supply areas where these will be more easily reached. Building occupancies. This was one that kind of caught me off guard. Was the building occupancies could possibly be calculated with social distancing in mind, not just fire safety. And in the residential side, we see additional home office space added, whether it be multi-use facilities, apartments, of course, single family, but having also a better, more stable broadband access to those. And then again, cyber, I can't stress that enough. Increased work from home has revealed a huge exposure to cybercrime, and that will have to be improved. And I know a lot of the cyber threat companies are attacking that as we speak. It just creates more links in the chain for a gap and opportunities for those who want to do harm via the web. That's all I got.
Okay, thanks very much. I hate to do this, but in the interest of time, let me just pop up the elements of what Virginia has put together in an emergency temporary standard for infectious diseases. If you go to GoToWebinar panel, there's a gray bar called Handouts. And if you click on that, you can download the actual standard and a 2-page summary that contains these 9 points and some other things. We just wanted to share this with you. As I said, it's just a couple days old. Tommy shared this with us, and we expect that other states are likely to follow Virginia's lead in this and develop something. It's 2:00. We had a full hour. I want to really thank everybody. We're going to spend a few minutes, if you can stay, and address a couple of questions. But before we do that, let me just thank everybody for taking the time to join us. Let me thank especially Kevin Cannon and Nazia Shah from AGC and Bob Weibel from CII for helping to make this joint webinar come together. If you have any further questions, please feel free to contact one or all of us. We do have the questions that you've asked, and what we'll do is we'll put together some responses for those, and we'll get back to you individually on those questions. Of course, I need to thank our panelists from AGC and CII for joining me today and for all the great information that you brought. So a few questions real quickly. If an employee lives with somebody, a family member or a roommate who becomes COVID positive, but the worker gets the rapid COVID screening and is negative and removes themselves from that house, are they okay to return to work? Anybody want to address that one?
Yeah, I'll take that one. I think most of us have a protocol already in place. And so if your company does not have a protocol and has made that available to you based on 5 levels of there's really 5 levels that we focus on, the CDC guidelines should be your primary guideline. The rapid test, keep in mind, currently, and again, the technology is changing, but the rapid test is only about 70 to 80% accurate, and it is really designed for somebody who's symptomatic at the time they take it. And so that's the only thing that I would give you caution of about the rapid test is it's not as accurate, and it's really designed for somebody who's symptomatic. Isolating the person who's sick is the most important thing. If somebody's tested positive, you probably should not go to work anyway, because there's going to be an incubation period, and then there's a good chance you even may be asymptomatic, be able to spread this virus, but not suffer some of any of the debilitating symptoms.
Okay, thanks. Another question, with all the preventive measures being taken, what level of impact on productivity has been seen in your projects?
If nobody else wants to take it, I'll take that one too. Sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I would say that it's in that sort of 10% range for some activities. An example would be some plumbing work that's being done in under trailers and whatnot, where it takes two people to work together, and then they have to put on the extra protective gear, and it's hot weather out, and they're working in close quarters. It's a difficult. You've turned a fairly simple task into a very difficult task. But I would say it's overall, it typically is just part of the normal PPE and the space required to do the work. It's really only when you get into some specialized activities where the special PPE comes into place, where it wasn't required before.
So we're actually seeing where some subcontractors are utilizing or putting in for maybe they're claiming some lost time or delay in time, schedule impact due to screening. Coming to work in the morning used to be open the gate and everybody was, in about a 20-minute period, everybody could be at work, be rolled out, ready to work. Now, we've had to have staggered start times, staggered lunch times. So we're seeing some delay in that. And then so we kind of see a squeeze where the subcontractor is trying to recover what he perceives to be some lost productivity on either cost or schedule. And then you have a general contractor who's trying to address that with the owner. And the owners in construction typically are, they're driven by time and schedule just as much as we are. Sometimes it's funding based, sometimes it's an opening, sometimes it's commitments outside of their realm. So learning to bridge that, what we have found is that's a topic that's brought up in the weekly conference, our weekly sub coordination meeting, as well as our daily schedule meetings, is who is impacted, what does that impact cost, and what's the true cost of it? Not using it to make a profit center, but how much of what we're doing is actually having a true impact. Because you have to make considerations for some contractual language and requirements that you can't just ignore.
Okay, thank you both very much. Probably one last question here because it's 2:06. Were any CII tools such as the construction readiness assessment used to assess the readiness of a project to restart once it had been shut down or slowed down significantly? Anybody? Sounds like we didn't see that. Good question, though. Go ahead, Paul.
I put it out there after the CII webinar on the tools that are useful. but there was a lot of other activities going on to get people back to site, and we just ran out of time on some of our bigger projects. But we really like the tool and need to integrate it into our work program in the future, that's for sure.
Yeah, let me just remind everybody, we did a webinar that looked at about a dozen tools fairly quickly. Obviously, it was an overview, but looked at about a dozen CII practices that could help during a restart or help assess the readiness to restart a project. And if you go to our website, www.construction-institute.org/blog, you can scroll back to, I believe, April sometime is when we did that webinar. And that recording is there. You can take a look at it. So let me just thank everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate your time. We hope you found today's information useful. Thanks again to all the participants and those who made this happen. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.